"Please dance with me before he sees," she whispered, not knowing the man was her new millionaire. "Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together." She knew she shouldn't have come tonight, but here she was. Christina Vey adjusted the thin strap of her midnight blue dress for the third time in 10 minutes, her dark eyes scanning the opulent ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast warm golden light over New York's elite, their laughter mixing with the soft jazz ensemble in the corner. Everything screamed luxury, from the white orchid centerpieces to the champagne flowing like water. At 28, Christina had learned to navigate these events with professional grace. Her job as a marketing consultant for luxe events demanded it, but tonight felt different. Tonight, her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. Just 3 hours, she reminded herself, smoothing her hands over the silk fabric that hugged her curves. Smile, network, leave. Her rich mahogany skin glowed under the chandelier light, and her natural hair was swept into an elegant updo that showcased the graceful line of her neck. She'd chosen this dress carefully, sophisticated yet striking, the deep blue complementing her warm undertones. But no amount of careful preparation could have readied her for what happened next. "Christina," the voice made her blood freeze. Slowly she turned. No, not here, not tonight. Blake Hoffman stood 10 feet away, his arm wrapped around a petite blonde in a designer gown that probably cost more than Christina's monthly rent. His smile was the same one that had once made her believe in forever. Before she'd discovered his text messages, his lies, his complete inability to see her worth. "You look..." Blake's eyes traveled over her appreciatively, and the blonde's grip on his arm tightened. "You look amazing." Christina's throat constricted. 6 months. 6 months since she'd ended things, since she'd promised herself never again to waste time on someone who couldn't appreciate what he had. 6 months of rebuilding, of learning to love herself again, of creating boundaries as strong as steel. And here he was, looking at her like she was dessert while his new girlfriend stood right beside him. "Blake," her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Congratulations on..." She gestured vaguely at the blonde, whose smile could have cut glass. "This is Tiffany," Blake said, seemingly oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. "Tiffany, this is Christina. We used to..." "Date," Christina finished, her professional mask sliding into place. "It's lovely to meet you, Tiffany." The blonde's laugh was sharp as broken crystal. "Oh, you're that Christina. Blake's told me so much about you." "I bet he has." Christina's hands began to tremble, with anger, with humiliation, with the sudden urge to flee this marble and gold prison. The walls felt like they were closing in, the laughter around them turning into white noise. That's when instinct took over. Without thinking, she turned to the nearest man, tall, broad-shouldered, with his back to her as he spoke quietly into his phone. She reached out, her fingers barely grazing the expensive fabric of his charcoal suit. "Excuse me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the music. "I'm so sorry, but could you please dance with me before he sees me fall apart?" The man ended his call and turned around. "Oh." Christina's breath caught in her throat. He was gorgeous in a way that seemed almost unfair. Sharp jawline, piercing grey eyes that seemed to see straight through her, dark hair perfectly styled, yet somehow touchable. He was probably 35, maybe 36, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. She expected questions, confusion, maybe even rejection. Instead, he slipped his phone into his jacket pocket and extended his hand. "Of course," he said, his voice low and warm like aged whiskey. "Though I should warn you, I might step on your toes." The relief that flooded through her was so intense, it almost brought tears to her eyes. "I'll risk it." His hand was warm and strong as it enveloped hers, sending an unexpected jolt of electricity up her arm. He led her to the dance floor with the confidence of a man who'd done this 1,000 times, but there was something gentle in the way he placed his other hand on the small of her back, protective, not possessive. The music shifted to something slower, more intimate, and suddenly the crowded ballroom faded away. There was only the warmth of his body close to hers, the subtle scent of his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her want to breathe deeper. "Better?" he asked softly, his breath warm against her ear. "Much." She looked up at him, surprised by the genuine concern in his grey eyes. "Thank you. I owe you an explanation." "No," he said, spinning her gently. "You don't owe me anything, but if you want to talk, I'm listening." Something about his voice, steady, patient, made her walls crack just a little. Ex-boyfriend, new girlfriend, very public humiliation in 3, 2, 1. He chuckled, a rich sound that vibrated through his chest. "Ah, the classic look how much better I'm doing without you showcase." Exactly. She found herself smiling for the first time all evening. And here I am, hiding behind a stranger like some teenager at prom. "Here you are," he agreed, his eyes never leaving hers, being brave enough to ask for help instead of suffering in silence. I'd say that takes courage. The song was ending too soon. She could feel other eyes on them, Blake's probably among them, but for these few precious minutes she didn't care. This stranger had given her exactly what she needed: safety, dignity, and the reminder that not all men were selfish. As the final notes faded, he didn't immediately let her go. Instead, he leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever he did to lose you," he said, "he's an idiot." Before she could respond, he stepped back and gave her a small bow, formal yet somehow intimate. "Thank you for the dance," he said. "I hope the rest of your evening is everything you need it to be." And then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd like something from a dream. Christina stood on the dance floor, her heart racing for entirely different reasons now. She touched her lips, still feeling the phantom warmth of his breath against her ear. Who was he? But as she looked around the ballroom, searching the sea of tuxedos and evening gowns, he was nowhere to be found, like he'd never existed at all, except for the way her skin still tingled where he touched her. What happens when Christina discovers her mysterious savior isn't as much of a stranger as she thought? Some weekends change everything. Christina's alarm buzzed at 6:30 a.m., cutting through the remnants of a dream where grey eyes and gentle hands still lingered. She groaned, burying her face deeper into her pillow. Egyptian cotton, a small luxury she'd bought herself after the Blake breakup, as a reminder that she deserved beautiful things. Her Harlem apartment was modest, but carefully curated: exposed brick walls, plants cascading from floating shelves, and morning light streaming through sheer curtains that cast dancing shadows across her hardwood floors. Everything in its place, everything chosen with intention, a reflection of the woman she'd become since reclaiming her life. But this morning, even her perfectly organized space couldn't quiet the restless energy humming beneath her skin. 3 days. 3 days since the wedding, since the dance, since a stranger's touch had made her forget every wall she'd built around her heart. She'd replayed those moments so many times they felt more like fantasy than memory. The warmth of his hand on her back, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only person in that crowded ballroom. "Get it together, Christina." She pulled herself from bed, her silk nightgown clinging to her curves as she padded to the bathroom. He was just being kind. You'll probably never see him again. But even as she told herself this, her fingers traced her collarbone where his breath had whispered against her skin, and a shiver ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the morning chill. By 8:45 a.m., she was striding through the marble lobby of the Meridian building in Midtown, her heels clicking a confident rhythm against the polished floor. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a tailored burgundy blazer that complemented her skin tone, paired with a pencil skirt that hugged her hips and fell just above the knee. Professional, powerful, with just enough edge to remind herself that she was a force to be reckoned with. "Morning, gorgeous." Jasmine Torres, her closest friend and fellow consultant, fell into step beside her as they approached the elevators. "You're glowing. Did you finally use that expensive face mask I got you?" Christina laughed, pressing the button for the 20th floor. "Something like that." "Spill. You've had that mysterious smile all morning." Jasmine's dark eyes sparkled with curiosity. At 26, she was all curves and confidence, with the kind of infectious energy that made clients fall in love with their events before they even started planning. "There's nothing to spill," Christina protested, but she could feel heat creeping up her neck. "Liar, you're blushing. Oh my God, did you meet someone at the wedding?" Before Christina could answer, the elevator dinged and the doors slid open to reveal their floor. A bustling, open-plan office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Luxe events occupied the entire 20th floor, and the morning energy was already electric, with ringing phones and animated conversations about upcoming galas and corporate launches. "Ladies and gentlemen," their boss, Richard Thorne, clapped his hands from the center of the office. "Conference room, 5 minutes. I want everyone to meet our new CEO." Christina's stomach dropped. New CEO. She'd heard rumors that the company was being acquired, but she'd assumed it was just corporate gossip. As one of their top consultants, she thought she would have been informed about something this significant. "Did you know about this?" she whispered to Jasmine as they made their way to the glass-walled conference room. Jasmine shook her head, looking equally surprised. "Richard's been acting weird all week, but I thought it was just stress from the Bennett wedding." They filed into the conference room along with the rest of the team, 15 of New York's most talented event consultants, all buzzing with nervous energy. Christina took a seat near the back, smoothing her skirt and trying to ignore the way her pulse had started racing. "Change is good," she reminded herself. "You've handled bigger surprises than this." Richard stood at the front of the room, his usually perfect silver hair slightly disheveled. "As you all know, Lux Events has been growing exponentially over the past 2 years. We've reached a point where we need fresh leadership, new vision." He paused, glancing toward the door. "Someone with the experience and resources to take us to the next level." The door opened. Time stopped. No. Anderson Mack stepped into the conference room, and Christina's world tilted on its axis. Gone was the formal tuxedo from Saturday night, replaced by a charcoal grey suit that fit him like it had been crafted specifically for his broad shoulders and lean frame. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his grey eyes scanning the room with the confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed. But when his gaze found hers, she saw the exact moment recognition hit him. His steps faltered, just for a heartbeat, and something flickered across his features. Surprise? Amusement? Heat? "Everyone," Richard continued, oblivious to the silent earthquake happening in the back of the room, "I'd like you to meet Anderson Mack, CEO of Mack Enterprises, and now the majority owner of Lux Events." Anderson's lips curved into the barest hint of a smile as he stepped forward. "Thank you, Richard. I'm excited to work with such a talented team." His voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth, confident, with an undertone that seemed to vibrate through her bones. Christina couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare as the man who'd saved her Saturday night, who'd held her with such gentle strength, who'd whispered reassurances against her ear, introduced himself as her new boss. Of course this would happen to her. "I believe in getting to know my team personally," Anderson continued, his eyes moving around the room, but somehow always returning to her. "So over the next few weeks, I'll be scheduling one-on-one meetings with each of you. I want to understand your strengths, your goals, and how we can grow together." Jasmine leaned over and whispered, "Holy shit, he's gorgeous. Did you see the way he looked at you?" Christina's cheeks burned. Yes, she had definitely seen. "I'll let Richard handle the logistics," Anderson said, "but I wanted to personally thank you all for the warm welcome. I have a feeling we're going to accomplish incredible things together." As the meeting dispersed, Christina remained frozen in her chair, watching as her colleagues introduced themselves to Anderson. He was gracious with everyone, shaking hands, asking thoughtful questions, making the kind of small talk that put people at ease. But every few seconds his gaze would drift back to her, and she felt that same electric jolt that had coursed through her when they danced. "This is a disaster." She stood abruptly, gathering her things with shaking hands. She needed air, space, time to process the fact that her mystery man was now her boss, and that the professional boundaries she'd spent years perfecting were about to be tested in ways she'd never imagined. "Christina," his voice stopped her, just as she reached the door. She turned slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. The conference room had emptied except for them, and suddenly the spacious area felt impossibly intimate. "Mr. Mack," she said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "Anderson," he corrected, taking a step closer. "I think we're past formalities, don't you?" She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. "Are we? Because from where I'm standing, the situation has become significantly more complicated." His smile was slow and devastating. Complicated. Yes, I suppose that's one word for it. The silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities and very spoken complications. Christina could smell his cologne, the same scent that had made her want to breathe deeper Saturday night, and her body responded with the awareness that was entirely inappropriate for a workplace conversation. "I should get back to work," she said finally, taking a step toward the door. "Christina." Her name on his lips made her pulse stutter. "Saturday night. Thank you for trusting me with that dance." She paused, her hand on the door handle. When she looked back at him, his expression was softer, more vulnerable than she'd expected. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not asking questions, even though I wanted to." The honesty in his admission sent heat flooding through her veins. Even though you wanted to, she agreed. Another moment, another heartbeat of possibility hanging in the air between them. Then she opened the door and walked away, leaving Anderson standing alone in the conference room, watching her go with an expression that promised their story was far from over. Because some coincidences are too perfect to be anything but destiny. The hardest part about wanting someone you can't have is pretending you don't. 2 weeks had passed since Anderson Mack walked into her life and turned everything upside down. 2 weeks of stolen glances across conference rooms, of conversations that started professional and ended with lingering looks that made Christina's skin burn. 2 weeks of pretending that her new boss was just another executive, when every fiber of her being remembered exactly how it felt to be in his arms. It was 7:30 p.m. on a Thursday, and the Lux Events office was finally quiet. Most of the team had gone home hours ago, but Christina remained at her desk, surrounded by fabric samples and venue photos for the upcoming Hartley Foundation Gala. She'd volunteered to stay late, partly because the event was her biggest project of the year, but mostly because going home meant being alone with thoughts of grey eyes and gentle hands. Her burgundy blouse had long since been untucked from her black pencil skirt, and she'd kicked off her heels hours ago, her bare feet tucked under her as she worked. The city lights twinkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow across her dark skin as she leaned over the layout mock-ups. Just a few more adjustments, she told herself, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Her natural curls had escaped their mourning style, framing her face in a way that was softer, more intimate than her usual professional look. Working late again? The voice made her jump, her heart immediately racing. She looked up to find Anderson standing in the doorway of her cubicle, his suit jacket gone, his tie loosened, the top button of his white shirt undone. He looked tired but still devastatingly handsome, his dark hair slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his fingers through it. "Mr. Mack." She straightened in her chair, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look. "I didn't realize you were still here." "Anderson," he corrected gently, stepping closer, "and I could say the same about you. It's almost 8 o'clock. The Hartley Gala is next month. I want everything perfect." She gestured to the chaos surrounding her desk. Color swatches, lighting plans, menu proposals. "Mrs. Hartley is particular." Anderson's lips quirked into a smile. "That's a diplomatic way of putting it. I've dealt with her before. She once made a florist cry because the roses were the wrong shade of pink." Despite herself, Christina laughed. "You've met her?" "Unfortunately." He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, close enough to see the way his shirt stretched across his broad chest. "She tried to buy my building last year, spent 3 hours listing everything that was wrong with the lobby marble. And did you sell? Do I look like a man who's easily intimidated by particular women?" His grey eyes sparkled with amusement, but there was something deeper there, something that made her pulse quicken. No, she thought, taking in his confident stance, the way he seemed to fill the space around her desk with his presence. "You look like a man who gets exactly what he wants." "Can I?" He gestured to the empty chair beside her desk. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He pulled the chair closer, closer than was strictly professional, and settled beside her. His knee brushed against hers, and the simple contact sent electricity shooting up her leg. "Show me what you're working on," he said, his voice lower now, more intimate in the quiet office. For the next hour they worked side by side, their heads bent over the plans as Christina walked him through every detail of the gala. Anderson asked thoughtful questions, offered suggestions that showed he understood both luxury and logistics, but more than that, he listened to her, really listened, in a way that made her feel heard and valued. "You're incredible at this," he said finally, leaning back in his chair. "The way you think about every angle, every guest experience. Mrs. Hartley is lucky to have you." Heat bloomed in Christina's chest at the genuine admiration in his voice. "Thank you. That means a lot." "I mean it." He turned to face her fully, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with possibility. "You have a gift for making people feel special. I should know." The reference to their dance made her breath catch. They'd been so careful to keep things professional for 2 weeks, but now, alone in the dim office with the city lights painting everything in gold, those carefully maintained boundaries felt gossamer thin. "Anderson?" she started, but he was already leaning closer. "I've been thinking about that night," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "About the way you looked at me when the music ended, like you were surprised that someone could see you. I was surprised." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. "Blake spent 2 years making me feel invisible. Then you looked at me like what?" Like I was worth seeing. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Anderson's hand moved slowly across the desk, his fingers stopping just short of touching hers. You are worth seeing, Christina. You're worth a lot more than that. She stared down at their almost touching hands, her heart hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. This was dangerous territory. Her boss, her job, everything she'd worked for, balanced on the edge of a decision that could change everything. We shouldn't, she whispered, even as every cell in her body screamed for her to close that last inch between them. I know. His thumb brushed against her knuckle, the lightest touch that somehow felt more intimate than anything she'd experienced with Blake. But I can't stop thinking about you, about us. There is no us. But even as she said it, she didn't pull her hand away. There can't be. Why? Because I'm your boss. He turned her hand over, his thumb tracing slow circles on her palm. Or because you're scared. The question hit too close to home and she finally pulled away, standing abruptly and putting distance between them. Because it's complicated. Because I just got my life back together. Because mixing business with what? He stood too, moving toward her with the predatory grace of a man who knew exactly what he wanted. With feelings? With chemistry? With something real? With fantasy? The word came out sharper than she intended. Saturday night was beautiful, Anderson, but it wasn't real life. Real life is budgets and deadlines and professional boundaries that exist for good reasons. He stopped just in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Is that what you think this is? Fantasy? Before she could answer, he reached up and tucked a loose curl behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. The touch was so gentle, so reverent, that it took her breath away. What I feel when I look at you, he said softly. What I felt when we danced, that's the most real thing I've experienced in years. For a moment she let herself lean into his touch, let herself imagine what it would be like to give in to the want that had been building between them. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and she felt herself melting under the tenderness in his grey eyes. This is how it starts, she thought. This is how you lose yourself again. The thought was like cold water, and she stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. I should go, she said, her voice unsteady. It's late, and I have an early meeting tomorrow. Disappointment flickered across his features, but he didn't try to stop her. Of course, let me walk you to your car. I take the subway. Then let me drive you home. Anderson, as your boss, he said firmly, making sure one of my employees gets home safely after working late. Nothing more. She wanted to argue, wanted to prove she could take care of herself, but the truth was that his concern felt too good to reject entirely. Okay, she said quietly. Thank you. 20 minutes later, she was sitting in the passenger seat of his sleek black BMW, the leather seats and subtle lighting, making the space feel intimate despite the professional reason for the ride. Anderson drove with confident ease through the Manhattan traffic, classical music playing softly in the background. Turn left here, she directed as they approached her neighborhood in Harlem. It's the brownstone with the blue door. He pulled up in front of her building, a beautiful pre-war structure that she'd fallen in love with the moment she saw it. The rent was more than she could comfortably afford, but it was hers, and it represented everything she'd built for herself. Thank you, she said, reaching for the door handle. For the ride, and for the help with the gala. Christina, his voice stopped her. When she looked back, his expression was serious, vulnerable in a way that made her chest tight. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever this is between us, I'm not running from it. She studied his face in the dim light from the street lamps, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, the determination in the set of his jaw. That's what scares me, she admitted. Then she was out of the car and up the steps to her building, not looking back even though she could feel his eyes on her, until she disappeared inside. Only when she was safely in her apartment did she allow herself to breathe, leaning back against her front door with her eyes closed. This was trouble. Beautiful, intoxicating, career-threatening trouble, and she was already in deeper than she'd ever intended to go. When playing with fire, someone always gets burned. But sometimes the flames are worth the risk. The problem with walls is that they can't keep out what's already inside. Friday morning came too soon, and not soon enough. Christina had spent most of the night replaying every moment in Anderson's car, the way his voice had dropped when he said her name, the promise in his eyes when he told her he wasn't running. She'd stood under a cold shower for 20 minutes, trying to wash away the memory of his thumb tracing her cheek, but his touch seemed permanently etched into her skin. Now, sitting at her desk with a steaming cup of coffee, she was determined to get back to normal. Professional boundaries, safe distances, The Hartley Gala timeline spread across her computer screen like a fortress of deadlines and logistics, something concrete to focus on instead of grey eyes and whispered confessions. "Girl, you look like you haven't slept in days." Jasmine appeared beside her desk, perching on the edge with her usual morning energy. She wore a bright yellow dress that complemented her warm skin tone, her long black hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. "Late night with the gala plans again?" "Something like that." Christina kept her eyes on her screen, not trusting herself to maintain eye contact. "Or maybe late night thinking about our gorgeous new CEO." Jasmine's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "Because, honey, the way that man looks at you is not appropriate for the workplace." Christina's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "What do you mean?" "I mean he watches you like a man starving and you look at him like you want to climb him like a tree." Jasmine grinned at Christina's shocked expression. "What? I'm observant. It's my job to notice chemistry." "You're imagining things," Christina protested, but heat was already creeping up her neck. "Am I? Because yesterday when he walked past your desk, you literally stopped breathing. And don't get me started on the way he said your name in the meeting, like it tasted good in his mouth. God, was it that obvious?" Christina buried her face in her hands. "Jazz, this can't happen. He's my boss. This job means everything to me." "I know, baby." Jasmine's voice softened, and she reached over to squeeze Christina's shoulder. "But maybe sometimes the best things come from the places we least expect." Before Christina could respond, a familiar voice cut through the morning chatter. "Good morning, ladies." Anderson's voice sent that familiar jolt through Christina's system. She looked up to find him standing beside her desk, immaculate in a navy suit that made his eyes look like storm clouds. His hair was perfectly styled, but she could see the slight shadows under his eyes that suggested he'd slept as poorly as she had. "Mr. Mack!" Jasmine jumped up, all professional brightness. "How are you settling in?" "Very well, thank you. And please call me Anderson." His smile was warm but distracted, his gaze shifting to Christina. "I was wondering if I could steal Christina for a few minutes. I have some questions about the upcoming projects." "Of course." Jasmine shot Christina a meaningful look before disappearing toward the coffee station. Anderson waited until they were relatively alone before speaking again. "My office? There's something I need to discuss with you." His office. Private. Intimate. Dangerous. "Of course," Christina managed, grabbing her tablet and following him across the open floor. Anderson's office was a corner suite with panoramic views of Central Park, furnished with clean lines and expensive materials that spoke of both success and refined taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the space with natural light, and she could see why he'd chosen this building. It was a powerful space that commanded respect. He closed the door behind them, and the soft click seemed to reverberate through her entire body. "Please, sit." He gestured to the seating area, a plush sofa and 2 chairs arranged around a glass coffee table. Choosing the chair felt safer than the sofa, so she settled there, crossing her legs and trying to look professional despite the way her pulse was racing. Anderson sat across from her, his elbows on his knees, his grey eyes intense and focused. "How are you feeling about the Hartley Gala?" "Good, great actually. Everything's on schedule, and Mrs. Hartley approved the final menu yesterday." She pulled up the timeline on her tablet, grateful to have something concrete to discuss. "The venue walkthrough is next Wednesday and—" "Christina." Her name on his lips made her stop mid-sentence. "That's not really why I asked you here." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "It's not? I need to apologize for last night, for pushing boundaries that should have stayed in place." He ran a hand through his hair, disturbing its perfect style. "You were right. This situation is complicated, and I shouldn't have made it more difficult for you." Relief and disappointment warred in her chest. "Thank you. I appreciate that. But I also need you to know that what I said in the car about not running from this, I meant every word." And there went her relief. "Anderson, hear me out." He leaned forward, his intensity making her breath catch. "I've built my career on making calculated decisions, on weighing risks and benefits. But with you, Christ, Christina, with you, calculation goes out the window." She stared at him, seeing the vulnerability beneath his controlled exterior. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've been in business for 15 years, and I've never once mixed personal with professional. I've never even been tempted." His grey eyes held hers captive. "Until now." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with possibility and danger. Christina gripped her tablet tighter, using it as an anchor to reality. "That doesn't change anything," she said quietly. "The complications are still there. The risks would be worth it, if you felt the same way." The confession hung between them like a challenge. Christina's mind raced, weighing everything she could lose against everything she might gain. Her job, her independence, her carefully reconstructed heart, but also him. "I need time," she said finally, "to think, to figure out what this means." Anderson nodded slowly. "I understand. And while you're thinking," he reached for a folder on the coffee table. "I have a proposition, a business proposition," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "What kind of proposition?" "There's a potential client in Vermont, luxury mountain resort, looking to host corporate retreats and high-end weddings. They want someone to come up, assess their facilities, make recommendations for event capabilities." He handed her the folder. "It's a big contract, could be huge for the company." Christina opened the folder, scanning the details. It was exactly the kind of project she excelled at. Complex, challenging, with endless creative possibilities. "This looks amazing. When would they need the consultation?" "Next weekend. 3 days, all expenses paid. They're very interested in working with us, but they want to meet our top consultant first." His smile was soft, almost shy. "That would be you." Pride warmed her chest at his confidence in her abilities. "You really think I'm the right person for this?" "I know you are. Your portfolio speaks for itself, and your vision for events is exactly what they're looking for." He paused, his expression becoming more serious. "But I should mention, I'd be going with you." Her stomach dropped. "What?" "As CEO, I need to be involved in contracts this size. And honestly," he ran his hand through his hair again, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as his tell when he was nervous. "I think some distance from the office might help us both think more clearly about everything." 3 days, in Vermont. With Anderson, it was either the best idea or the worst idea she'd ever heard. "I don't know if that's smart," she said carefully. "Probably not," he agreed, "but it's business. Important business that could set both our careers on incredible trajectories." His grey eyes met hers. "Can you handle 3 days of strictly professional interaction? Because I promise you, that's all it would be." She studied his face, looking for any sign that he was being less than honest. But his expression was earnest, determined, the face of a man making a genuine business offer. It was a good opportunity, a great opportunity, the kind that could establish her as one of the premier event consultants on the East Coast. "Strictly professional," she repeated. "Absolutely. Separate rooms. Of course. And when we get back, we go back to normal working relationship. No more late-night conversations or car rides home." Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe. But he nodded. "If that's what you want." It wasn't what she wanted. That was the problem. What she wanted was to lean across this coffee table and kiss him until they both forgot about professional boundaries and calculated risks. What she wanted was to find out if his hands felt as good on the rest of her body as they did on her face. But wanting and having were two very different things. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll do it, for the business opportunity." His smile was bright enough to power the city. "Excellent. I'll have my assistant make the arrangements. We'll leave Friday afternoon." As she stood to leave, folder clutched against her chest like armor. Anderson's voice stopped her at the door. "Christina, for what it's worth, I think you're worth the risk, whatever that might mean for both of us." She didn't trust herself to respond, so she simply nodded and escaped to the safety of the open office. But even as she tried to focus on her work for the rest of the day, his words echoed in her mind. Worth the risk. 3 days in Vermont would test that theory in ways she wasn't sure either of them were prepared for. Some business trips are about business. Others are about discovering what you're really made of. Some promises are meant to be broken. The drive to Vermont should have been peaceful. Rolling hills painted in autumn gold, crisp October air flowing through the partially open windows of Anderson's BMW, classical music, creating a sophisticated soundtrack to their journey. It should have been the perfect opportunity for professional conversation about the upcoming client meeting. Instead, Christina found herself hyper-aware of everything about the man sitting 18 inches away from her. The way his long fingers gripped the steering wheel with confident ease. The subtle flex of his forearm when he shifted gears. The way his cologne mixed with the mountain air to create something intoxicating that made her want to breathe deeper. Even his profile was distracting. The strong line of his jaw, the way his dark hair caught the late afternoon sunlight. 3 days, she reminded herself for the 100th time since leaving Manhattan 4 hours ago. Strictly professional. You can handle 3 days. "The resort is just around this bend," Anderson said, his voice cutting through her internal pep talk. According to the GPS, anyway. Christina looked up from her tablet, where she'd been pretending to review the client notes, and gasped. The Willowbrook Mountain Resort spread before them, like something from a fairy tale. A massive stone and timber lodge nestled against the backdrop of mountains dressed in full splendor. The main building was elegant yet rustic, with expansive terraces and floor-to-ceiling windows that promised breathtaking views from every room. "Oh my God," she breathed, pressing her hand against the passenger window. "Anderson, this is incredible." He smiled at her reaction, and she felt that familiar flutter in her stomach. "Wait until you see the event spaces. The photos they sent don't do them justice." As they pulled up the circular drive, Christina could already see the potential. The outdoor ceremony site overlooking the valley, the grand ballroom with its soaring ceilings and rustic chandeliers, the intimate dining spaces perfect for rehearsal dinners or corporate gatherings. This could be huge, she thought, her professional excitement temporarily overriding her personal anxiety. This could change everything for the company. A valet approached their car as Anderson put it in park. "Welcome to Willowbrook," the young man said with a genuine smile. "Mr. Mack and Ms. Vey, I presume." "That's us," Anderson confirmed, handing over the keys. "Are we checking in at the main desk?" "Actually, Mr. Hendricks asked me to escort you directly to him. He's waiting in the maple room with some champagne to welcome you properly." James Hendricks, Christina remembered from their correspondence. The resort owner who'd inherited the property from his grandfather and was determined to transform it into Vermont's premier luxury destination. She'd spoken with him several times over the phone, and his passion for the project had been infectious. They followed the valet through the magnificent lobby, all exposed beams and natural stone, with a massive fireplace crackling in the center and comfortable seating areas that invited guests to linger. The space managed to feel both grand and intimate, luxurious yet welcoming. "Christina, Anderson!" A tall man with silver hair and kind eyes approached them with arms outstretched. James Hendricks was exactly as she'd pictured, distinguished, warm, with the kind of presence that made you feel like you'd been friends for years. "Welcome, welcome. How was the drive?" "Beautiful," Christina said, accepting his enthusiastic handshake. "The fall foliage is spectacular. Perfect timing. We're at peak color this week." James gestured for them to follow him toward a smaller sitting area near the windows. "I can't tell you how excited we are about this partnership possibility. When I saw your portfolio, Christina, I knew immediately that you understood what we're trying to create here." Pride warmed her chest at his words. "Your vision for the resort is extraordinary, Mr. Hendricks. The blend of rustic charm and luxury amenities, it's exactly what high-end clients are looking for." "Please call me James, and yes, that's precisely what we're after. Grandfather built this place as a simple mountain retreat, but I can see so much more potential." His eyes lit up as he spoke, and Christina found herself caught up in his enthusiasm. They settled into comfortable leather chairs arranged around a coffee table laden with local cheeses, fresh fruit, and yes, champagne chilling in an elegant ice bucket. Through the panoramic windows, the mountain vista was painted in shades of amber and crimson that seemed almost too beautiful to be real. "This is Dom Perignon," James said, popping the cork with practiced ease. "A little celebration of what I hope will be the beginning of a very successful partnership." As he poured the champagne, Christina caught Anderson watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. There was pride there, certainly. He looked pleased by James's obvious appreciation of her work. But there was something else, something warmer and more personal that made her pulse quicken. "Professional," she reminded herself, accepting her champagne flute. "We're here for business." "So," James continued, settling back in his chair, "I thought we'd start with a tour this evening, just the highlights, then do a more comprehensive walkthrough tomorrow. We have the bridal suite set up for viewing, the ballroom is decorated for a mock ceremony, and I've arranged for our executive chef to prepare a tasting menu that showcases what we can offer for events." "That sounds perfect," Anderson said, his CEO voice smooth and confident. "Christina has some excellent ideas for maximizing your event potential, and I'm excited to see how they align with your vision." The next hour passed in animated discussion about capacities and logistics, seasonal considerations and marketing strategies. Christina found herself in her element, sketching possibilities and asking detailed questions, while James responded with infectious enthusiasm. Anderson contributed thoughtful insights about business development and long-term growth potential, and she was struck by how seamlessly they worked as a team. "This is why he's successful," she thought, watching him listen intently to James's concerns about competing with established venues. He doesn't just make decisions, he understands people. Well, James said finally, glancing at his watch. It's nearly 6. Why don't I show you to your room so you can freshen up, and we'll meet for dinner at 7:30. The Sunset Terrace has the best views on the property. That sounds wonderful, Christina said, gathering her things. James led them to the main desk, where an efficient young woman named Sophie checked them in with professional warmth. Miss Vey, you're in the Aspen suite on the 3rd floor, she said, handing over an old-fashioned brass key. And Mr. Mac, you're in the Birch suite just down the hall. Just down the hall. Christina's stomach fluttered with an emotion she refused to analyze. The elevator is just there, Sophie continued, and if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to call the front desk. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor was silent, charged with an awareness that seemed to intensify in the enclosed space. Anderson's reflection in the polished brass doors showed her his profile, the strong line of his shoulders beneath his jacket, the way his hands hung relaxed at his sides. Get it together, she told herself, as the elevator dinged softly and the doors opened. The hallway was elegantly appointed with rich burgundy carpet and tasteful artwork featuring local landscapes. Christina's suite was the first door, Anderson's the 3rd. Close enough that she'd be acutely aware of his presence, but far enough to maintain the illusion of propriety. I'll see you at dinner, she said, her key suddenly feeling heavy in her hand. Christina. Her name stopped her as she reached her door. When she turned, Anderson was standing in front of his suite, his grey eyes serious. You were incredible in there, with James. This is exactly the kind of project that's going to establish you as one of the premier consultants in the industry. The genuine admiration in his voice made her chest tight with emotion. Thank you. That means everything coming from you. I mean it. Watching you work, seeing how you think through problems and create solutions. It's remarkable. They stood there in the hallway, separated by 20 feet and 1,000 unspoken possibilities. The professional praise felt like a lifeline, something safe and appropriate to focus on instead of the way her body responded to his presence. I should get ready for dinner, she said finally. Of course, I'll see you at 7:30. But neither of them moved. The silence stretched between them, filled with everything they weren't saying, everything they were trying not to feel. Finally, Anderson cleared his throat. Strictly professional, he said, but his voice was rougher than usual. Strictly professional, she agreed, though the words felt like a lie on her lips. She escaped into her suite and leaned against the closed door, her heart racing. The room was beautiful, exposed stone walls, a massive 4-poster bed draped in luxurious linens, a fireplace already crackling with warmth. French doors opened onto a private balcony that overlooked the valley, where the last light of day was painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. 3 days, she reminded herself again, moving toward the window. You can maintain professional boundaries for 3 days. But as she looked out at the romantic mountain landscape, as she thought about dinner on the Sunset Terrace, and the way Anderson had looked at her in the hallway, she was beginning to suspect that some promises were impossible to keep, especially when you didn't really want to keep them in the first place. In the mountains, it's easy to lose your way. The question is, do you want to be found? Some dinners are about business. Others are about surrendering to what you've been fighting. Christina stood before the full-length mirror in her suite, smoothing her hands over the emerald green wrap dress she'd chosen for dinner. The silk fabric draped elegantly across her curves, the color bringing out the warm undertones in her dark skin. She'd left her natural hair in soft curls that framed her face, and the subtle makeup she'd applied emphasized her dark eyes and full lips. Professional dinner, she reminded herself, adjusting the delicate gold necklace at her throat. Business discussion, nothing more. But even as she told herself this, she couldn't ignore the flutter of anticipation in her stomach or the way her pulse quickened at the thought of seeing Anderson again. The Sunset Terrace was on the resort's top floor, accessed by a glass elevator that offered breathtaking views of the mountain landscape. As the doors opened, Christina's breath caught in her throat. The terrace was magical, an open-air dining space with elegant tables scattered among twinkling fairy lights and carefully placed heaters that kept the October evening comfortable. But it was the view that truly stole her breath. The entire valley spread before them, painted in the golden light of the setting sun. Miss Vey, James appeared at her elbow, resplendent in a navy blazer and warm smile. You look absolutely stunning. That color is magnificent on you. Thank you, James. This place is... She gestured helplessly at the view. There are no words. Wait until you see it in full sunset. We timed dinner perfectly. He guided her toward a corner table where Anderson was already seated, rising smoothly as they approached. Oh, if she'd thought Anderson was handsome in his business suits, seeing him in evening wear was almost overwhelming. He wore a charcoal grey jacket over a white shirt, no tie, the top button undone in a way that was both elegant and slightly undone. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and when his grey eyes met hers, she felt that familiar jolt of electricity. "Christina," he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed to caress her name. "You look beautiful." Heat bloomed in her cheeks. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." His smile was slow and devastating. "I try." James either didn't notice the charged moment between them or chose to ignore it, settling into his chair with characteristic enthusiasm. "I took the liberty of ordering a wine pairing with dinner. Our sommelier has excellent taste, and I wanted you to experience our full hospitality offerings." The next hour passed in a haze of exquisite food and animated conversation. The chef had outdone himself. Seared duck breast with a cherry reduction, local trout with herb butter, handmade pasta with wild mushrooms. Each course was accompanied by wines that complemented the flavors perfectly, and James regaled them with stories about the resort's history and his vision for its future. But Christina found herself increasingly distracted by Anderson's presence across the small table, the way he listened intently when she spoke, his grey eyes never leaving her face. The way he asked thoughtful questions that showed he understood not just the business implications of her suggestions, but the creative passion behind them. The way his fingers moved as he gestured, making her remember how those hands had felt on her skin. "Focus," she told herself, taking perhaps her fourth sip of the incredible Pinot Noir. "This is work." "The wedding season here runs from May through October," James was saying, "though we're getting more inquiries about winter ceremonies. There's something magical about the mountains in snow. Winter weddings are having a moment," Christina agreed, grateful for the professional topic. "Especially for couples who want something intimate and dramatic. The key would be making sure you have adequate indoor alternatives and heating solutions for outdoor elements." "Exactly what I was thinking," James said, his eyes lighting up. "We could do ceremony sites near the main lodge with those gorgeous picture windows as backup, and hot chocolate bars instead of cocktail hours. With local maple syrup and bourbon," Anderson added with a grin. "Very Vermont." They laughed, and Christina felt herself relaxing into the easy camaraderie. This was why she loved her job: the creative collaboration, the problem-solving, the moment when vision became reality. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, James excused himself to check on dessert preparations. "I'll be right back," he said. "Please enjoy the view. This is the best part of the evening." And suddenly Christina was alone with Anderson, as the world turned golden around them. The silence that fell between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was charged with possibility. Anderson's eyes reflected the warm light of the setting sun, and she found herself unable to look away. "This is incredible," she said finally, gesturing toward the vista spread before them. "It is," he agreed, but he was looking at her, not the view. "Though I have to admit the scenery isn't what's captured my attention tonight." Her breath caught. "Anderson, I know, professional boundaries, but Christ, Christina, sitting here with you, watching you work your magic with James." He ran a hand through his hair, disturbing its perfect style. "You're remarkable, not just professionally, but what?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "But everything. The way you think, the way you laugh, the way you get this little line between your eyebrows when you're concentrating." His voice was low, intimate in a way that made her pulse race. "The way you made me feel that night we danced, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be." The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability in his grey eyes, made her chest tight with emotion. "You can't say things like that." "Why? Because it's inappropriate? Because it complicates things?" He leaned forward slightly, his intensity making her breath shallow. "Or because it scares you?" "All of the above," she whispered. "It scares me too." The admission seemed to surprise him. "I've never felt anything like this before, Christina. This pull, this need to be near you, to make you smile, to protect you from anything that might hurt you." Her hands trembled as she reached for her wineglass. "This is exactly what we said wouldn't happen. I know. But sitting here with you, watching the sun set over the mountains..." He paused, his eyes searching her face. "Some things are bigger than our plans." The sun was sinking lower now, painting everything in warm gold and deep amber. The fairy lights twinkled like stars, and the mountain air carried the scent of pine and wood smoke. It was impossibly romantic, impossibly perfect, and Christina felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "What are you asking me, Anderson?" "I'm asking you to stop running, to stop hiding behind professional boundaries and past hurts, and all the very logical reasons why this is complicated." His hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching hers. "I'm asking you to take a chance on something real, and if it doesn't work out, if we destroy what we have professionally, then we'll deal with it together." His fingers finally closed over hers, warm and strong and achingly gentle. "But what if it does work out? What if we're missing something extraordinary because we're too afraid to try?" The touch of his skin against hers sent electricity shooting up her arm. She stared down at their joined hands, his thumb tracing slow circles on her knuckles in a gesture that was becoming beautifully familiar. "Christina." Her name was barely a whisper. "Look at me." When she lifted her eyes to his, the intensity she saw there nearly stole her breath. Want, need, something deeper than desire, something that spoke to parts of her heart she'd thought Blake had broken beyond repair. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "So am I." His smile was soft, vulnerable. "But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you." Before she could respond, James returned with a flourish, carrying a tray of what looked like the most decadent chocolate dessert she'd ever seen. "Dessert is served," he announced cheerfully. "Our signature chocolate souffle with Vermont maple ice cream." Anderson didn't immediately release her hand, and for a moment, the three of them formed a strange tableau, James beaming with hospitality pride, Christina and Anderson caught in a moment of raw honesty. Finally, Anderson pulled back, but his eyes never left her face. "This looks incredible, James. Thank you for such a perfect evening." "My pleasure entirely. I hope this is just the first of many collaborations." As they shared the rich dessert, conversation turned back to business logistics and timeline discussions. But underneath the professional chatter, Christina was acutely aware of Anderson's presence, of the promise in his eyes, of the decision that was crystallizing in her heart, despite every logical argument against it. When dinner finally ended, and James walked them back to the elevator, Christina felt like she was floating. The wine, the perfect food, the romantic setting, the weight of Anderson's confession, it all combined to create a dreamlike quality that made reality feel distant and malleable. "Thank you for an incredible evening," she told James as they reached the elevator. "Everything was perfect. Wonderful. Tomorrow we'll do the full facility tour and you can see everything in daylight. I think you're going to be amazed by the possibilities." The elevator ride to their floor was silent, but the air between them hummed with tension. When the doors opened, they walked slowly down the hallway, neither seeming eager to end the evening. At her door, Christina fumbled with the old-fashioned key, hyper-aware of Anderson standing just behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Christina." His voice was rough, uncertain. She turned to face him, her back against her door, her heart hammering against her ribs. He was so close she could see the flecks of silver in his grey eyes, could smell his cologne mixed with the mountain air. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "That depends." He reached up, his fingers barely grazing her cheek. "Are you still running?" She looked into his eyes, seeing the hope and fear and desire there, feeling the echo of all those emotions in her own chest. 3 weeks ago, she'd been content with her safe, controlled life. 3 weeks ago, she'd thought she had everything figured out. 3 weeks ago, she hadn't met Anderson Mack. "No," she whispered, "I'm not running anymore." His smile was like sunrise, slow and warming and full of promise. "Good," he said softly, "because I think this view is about to get even better." And as he leaned closer, Christina realized that some falls are worth the landing. When you stop running from what scares you, you might just find what you've been searching for all along. Some kisses change everything. The space between them disappeared like morning mist. Anderson's hand cupped her face with a tenderness that made Christina's knees weak, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone as his grey eyes searched hers one final time. "Are you sure?" he whispered, his breath warm against her lips. Instead of answering with words, she rose on her toes and closed the last inch between them. The kiss was everything she'd imagined and nothing she could have prepared for. Soft at first, tentative, like they were both afraid the moment might shatter. But when she sighed against his lips, when her hands found the lapels of his jacket, something ignited between them. Anderson's other arm wound around her waist, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened. She tasted wine and promise on his lips, felt the barely restrained passion in the way his fingers tangled in her hair. This wasn't the gentle dance they'd shared at the wedding. This was raw, honest, electric with weeks of denied attraction. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Christina felt like the world had shifted on its axis. Anderson rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, his hands still framing her face like she was something precious. That was, he started, then seemed to lose the words. Worth the risk, she finished softly. His smile was brilliant in the dim hallway light. Definitely worth the risk. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet corridor, the magnitude of what had just changed settling around them. Christina could feel Anderson's heart beating against her chest, could smell his cologne mixed with the mountain air, could taste the lingering sweetness of the kiss on her lips. She started, then stopped, not really wanting to finish the sentence. Go inside, he agreed, but he made no move to step away. We have an early morning tomorrow. The full facility tour, she said, trying to remember what their actual purpose was for being here. Business, he said, his thumb stroking across her lower lip, in a gesture that was anything but businesslike. Strictly professional, she whispered, but the words had lost all meaning. Absolutely professional, he agreed, then kissed her again, soft and sweet and full of promises for tomorrow. When he finally stepped back, Christina felt cold without his warmth. She fumbled with her key again, more distracted now than she'd been before. Good night, Christina, he said softly. Good night, Anderson. She slipped inside her suite and leaned against the closed door, her heart racing and her lips still tingling from his kiss. Through the wood, she could hear his footsteps moving down the hall, the soft sound of his door opening and closing. What have I done? She thought, touching her lips with trembling fingers. What have we done? But even as her logical mind tried to catalogue all the ways this could complicate their lives, her heart was singing with a joy she hadn't felt in years. Anderson's kiss had been everything Blake's never were. Passionate yet gentle, demanding yet respectful, full of promise rather than possession. She moved to the French doors leading to her balcony, stepping out into the cool mountain air. The valley below was draped in darkness now, dotted with the warm lights of distant homes. Above, stars glittered in the clear Vermont sky like scattered diamonds. I'm falling for him, she realized, the thought both thrilling and terrifying. I'm falling for my boss, and I don't know how to stop. Did she even want to stop? The next morning dawned crisp and clear, painting the mountains in shades of gold and amber. Christina woke slowly, stretching in the luxurious bed as memories of the previous evening flooded back. The kiss, Anderson's hands in her hair, the way he'd looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. She showered and dressed carefully in dark jeans, ankle boots, and a cream cashmere sweater that was both professional and practical for walking around the resort grounds. Her reflection in the mirror showed bright eyes and a flush in her cheeks that had nothing to do with makeup. Business, she reminded herself, applying a final coat of lip gloss. Today is about business. But when she met Anderson in the lobby 40 minutes later, business was the furthest thing from her mind. He was devastating in dark jeans and a forest green Henley that brought out his eyes, his hair slightly mussed in a way that made her want to run her fingers through it. Good morning, he said, his voice warm and intimate, despite the public setting. Good morning. She was proud of how normal she sounded, even though her pulse had kicked into overdrive the moment she saw him. Sleep well? There was something in his grey eyes, a heat, a promise, that made the innocent question feel loaded with innuendo. Eventually, she said truthfully. She'd spent most of the night replaying their kiss, wondering what came next. Before he could respond, James appeared with his characteristic enthusiasm, dressed in hiking boots and a fleece jacket. Good morning, you two. Ready for the grand tour? I thought we'd start with the outdoor ceremony sites, then work our way through the different indoor spaces. Sounds perfect, Christina said, grateful for the professional focus. The next 3 hours were a whirlwind of possibilities. James led them through gardens that would be perfect for intimate ceremonies, showed them the lakeside pavilion, where couples could exchange vows with the water sparkling behind them, toured them through ballrooms that could accommodate everything from corporate retreats to lavish wedding receptions. And through it all, Christina was acutely aware of Anderson's presence, the way he asked thoughtful questions about logistics, how he listened when she outlined creative possibilities for each space, the occasional brush of his hand against hers when they looked at layouts together. This is our crown jewel, James said as they entered the resort's main ballroom. The space was breathtaking, soaring ceilings with exposed beams, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains, a massive stone fireplace that could serve as a stunning backdrop for ceremonies. "Oh my God," Christina breathed, immediately seeing the potential. "James, this is incredible. You could do ceremonies here year-round. Spring with the windows open to the gardens, winter with the fireplace blazing." "Exactly," James beamed. "We could accommodate up to 200 guests for a seated dinner or 300 for cocktail-style receptions." Christina was already moving around the space, her mind racing with possibilities. "The natural lighting is perfect for photography, and if you added some subtle uplighting along the beams, some carefully placed florals—" She trailed off, realizing both men were watching her with amused expressions. "Sorry," she said, feeling heat creep up her neck. "I get a little carried away." "Don't apologize," Anderson said, his voice warm with admiration. "This is what you do. This is your gift." The genuine pride in his voice made her chest tight with emotion. Blake had always made her feel like her passion for her work was excessive, dramatic. Anderson looked at her like her enthusiasm was something wonderful. "He's right," James added. "I can practically see the events taking shape as you talk. You have an incredible vision." They spent another hour touring the resort's other amenities. The spa, the wine cellar perfect for intimate tastings, the outdoor terraces that could serve as cocktail spaces. By the time they returned to the main lodge for lunch, Christina's head was spinning with creative possibilities. "This could be huge for both of us," she told Anderson quietly, as James went to check on their lunch reservations. "The revenue potential, the prestige clients this could attract." "I know," he said, but he was looking at her with an expression that had nothing to do with business. "You're amazing, you know that? Watching you work, seeing how your mind processes these spaces." "Anderson," she started, but he stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne. "I can't stop thinking about last night," he said quietly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "About kissing you, about how right it felt." Her breath caught. "We're in public, I know, and tonight, after we finish the business discussions, I want to talk to you, really talk, about what this means, about what we're doing." Before she could respond, James returned with news that their table was ready. But as they walked toward the restaurant, Christina felt like she was floating. Anderson wanted to talk. He wanted to figure out what came next. Maybe, she thought, stealing a glance at his profile, some risks really are worth taking. The afternoon flew by in more detailed discussions about pricing, logistics, and timeline possibilities. By the time they were saying goodbye to James and loading their bags into Anderson's car, Christina felt like they'd accomplished something significant. "I think we have a deal," Anderson said, as they pulled away from the resort. "James is exactly the kind of client we want to work with." "I think you're right," she agreed. "This could be the beginning of something really special." He glanced over at her, his gray eyes warm. "I hope so. In more ways than one." As they began the drive back toward the city, the weight of everything that had changed in just 24 hours settled around them. The successful business meeting, the kiss that had shifted everything, the promise of more conversations to come. Whatever happens next, Christina thought, watching the Vermont mountains fade in the rearview mirror, there's no going back to the way things were. And for the first time in years, she was okay with that. Some business trips are about contracts. Others are about discovering what you really want. Sometimes the hardest part isn't falling in love, it's figuring out how to live with it. Monday morning in Manhattan felt like stepping into a different universe. The Vermont mountains and romantic terraces seemed like a beautiful dream as Christina stood in her Harlem apartment, staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at her had the same face, the same dark eyes and full lips, but something fundamental had changed. "You kissed your boss," she reminded herself, applying mascara with hands that trembled slightly. "Your gorgeous, successful, completely off-limits boss." But even as her logical mind tried to catalogue all the ways this could complicate her carefully constructed life, her lips still tingled with the memory of Anderson's kiss, the way he'd held her face like she was precious, the promise in his grey eyes when he'd said they needed to talk. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a tailored black dress with a burgundy blazer, professional yet flattering. If she was going to navigate this new reality, she needed armor that made her feel confident and in control. "You can do this," she told herself, grabbing her purse and laptop bag. "Professional boundaries, clear communication, figure out what this means without destroying everything you've worked for." The subway ride to Midtown was a blur of morning commuters and internal pep talks. But when the elevator doors opened on the 20th floor of the Meridian building, Christina felt her pulse kick into overdrive. He's here. somewhere in this building, and everything has changed. Christina! Jasmine's voice cut through her swirling thoughts. Girl, you look amazing. Did Vermont agree with you? Christina forced a smile, hoping her face didn't reveal the chaos in her mind. It was productive. The resort is incredible. I think we're looking at a major new partnership. And Anderson? Jasmine's dark eyes sparkled with curiosity. How was traveling with Mr. Tall, Dark and Gorgeous? Complicated, life-changing, perfect, professional, Christina managed. Very professional. Jasmine's eyebrows rose, and Christina could see she wasn't buying the careful response. But before her friend could press for details, Richard Thorne's voice boomed across the office. Christina, my office, 5 minutes. I want to hear everything about Vermont. Perfect excuse to escape Jasmine's interrogation. I should go prep for that meeting, Christina said, already moving toward her desk. But as she gathered her notes from the trip, she couldn't stop her eyes from drifting toward Anderson's corner office. The blinds were closed, but she could see his silhouette through the frosted glass, already at work despite the early hour. Does he feel as unsettled as I do, she wondered. Is he thinking about the kiss, about what comes next? The meeting with Richard went well. He was thrilled about the potential partnership with Willowbrook, excited about the revenue projections and the prestige it would bring to Lux events. But Christina found herself distracted, hyper-aware of every footstep in the hallway, every voice that might belong to Anderson. Excellent work, Richard concluded, leaning back in his chair with satisfaction. Anderson made the right call sending you up there. You two make a good team. If only he knew how good, Christina thought, her cheeks heating at the unintended innuendo. I should get back to work, she said, standing quickly. I want to put together a comprehensive proposal for James while everything's fresh in my mind. She escaped to her desk and threw herself into work, using spreadsheets and timelines as shields against the emotional chaos swirling in her chest. But every few minutes her eyes would drift toward Anderson's office, and her pulse would stutter at the memory of his hands in her hair. Focus, she commanded herself. This is your career, your future. Don't let one kiss, no matter how perfect, derail everything you've built. But God, what a kiss it had been. At 11:30, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Lunch? We should talk. A. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at the message. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to rush to wherever he wanted to meet, and figure out what this new reality looked like. But the rational part of her mind, the part that had learned hard lessons about mixing personal and professional, urged caution. She typed and deleted half a dozen responses before settling on, rain check? Crazy busy with the Vermont proposal. Maybe later this week. The response came back almost immediately. Of course. Take your time. We'll talk when you're ready. The understanding in his message made her chest tight with emotion. Blake would have been pushy, demanding, would have made her feel guilty for prioritizing work. Anderson was giving her space to process, to figure things out on her own timeline, which somehow made her want to see him even more. The rest of the week passed in a strange dance of near misses and stolen glances. They attended the same meetings, exchanged professional pleasantries in the elevator, collaborated on the Willowbrook proposal with careful efficiency. But underneath the professional veneer, Christina was acutely aware of every shared look, every accidental brush of fingers when passing documents. Anderson seemed to be following her lead, maintaining perfect professional boundaries, while his eyes held promises of deeper conversations to come. It should have been reassuring. Instead, it made her want him more. This is ridiculous, she thought Friday afternoon, watching him present quarterly projections to the team. You're a grown woman. Figure out what you want and deal with it. But what she wanted felt impossible to reconcile with what was practical. She wanted Anderson, his laugh, his hands, his way of looking at her, like she was the most interesting person in the room. She wanted to explore whatever was building between them. But she also wanted her career, her independence, the security she'd worked so hard to build. Why can't you have both? A small voice in her head whispered. Why does it have to be either or? She was still wrestling with these thoughts when she packed up her desk Friday evening. Most of the office had cleared out by 6, but she'd stayed late to finish the final details on the Willowbrook proposal. It was perfect, comprehensive, creative, exactly the kind of work that established her as one of the premier consultants in the city. She was just gathering her things when a familiar voice made her pulse stutter. Working late again? Anderson stood beside her desk, his suit jacket gone, his tie loosened in a way that was becoming dangerously familiar. His gray eyes were warm but cautious, like he was testing the waters. Just finishing up the Willowbrook proposal, she said, proud of how normal her voice sounded. "I wanted to get it perfect before we send it Monday. May I?" He gestured toward her computer screen. She nodded, and he moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, close enough to see the late-day stubble along his jaw. As he read through her work, she found herself studying his profile. The strong line of his nose, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the slight smile that curved his lips as he scrolled through her detailed plans. "This is incredible," he said finally, turning to face her. "Christina, this is the kind of proposal that wins industry awards. James is going to be blown away." Pride warmed her chest at his genuine admiration. "Thank you. That means everything. I mean it." His hand moved toward hers on the desk, then stopped just short of touching. "You're brilliant at this. Watching you work, seeing how your mind creates these experiences." The unfinished sentence hung in the air between them, charged with everything they weren't saying. Christina stared down at their almost touching hands, remembering the warmth of his fingers against hers in Vermont. "Anderson," she started, then stopped, not sure what she wanted to say. "I know," he said softly. "This is complicated. I know you need time to process everything that happened in Vermont. I'm not trying to rush you or pressure you into anything." The gentleness in his voice, the understanding, made her chest tight with emotion. "It's not that I don't want—" She trailed off, frustrated by her inability to articulate the chaos in her heart. "What is it then?" She looked up at him, seeing the genuine concern in his grey eyes, the way he was trying so hard to give her space while clearly wanting to be closer. "It's that I want it too much," she admitted quietly. "This job, this company, it's everything I've worked for, and you— God, Anderson, you scare me because I want you in ways that could mess up everything I've built." His expression softened, and this time he did reach for her hand, his fingers warm and strong as they closed over hers. "What if it doesn't mess things up?" he asked gently. "What if it makes everything better? And what if it doesn't? What if we try this and it destroys our working relationship? What if—" Christina, her name on his lips, stopped her spiral of worry. "What if we stop asking what if and start asking what do we want?" She stared into his eyes, seeing the hope and fear and desire there, feeling the echo of all those emotions in her own chest. "I want you," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I want this, but I'm terrified." His smile was soft and understanding. "So am I, but I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you." The same words he'd said in Vermont, but this time in the familiar setting of their office with the city lights twinkling beyond the windows, they felt more real, more possible. "So what do we do?" she asked. "We take it slow. We figure it out together. We don't let fear make our decisions for us." His thumb traced circles on her knuckles, a gesture that was becoming beautifully familiar. "And we start with dinner. Tomorrow night. Not business. Just us." Her heart raced at the invitation, at the promise in his voice. "A real date?" "A real date," he confirmed, "if you want it to be." She studied his face, seeing the vulnerability beneath his confident exterior, the way he was putting himself out there, despite the professional complications. "Stop overthinking," she told herself. "Stop being afraid of what might go wrong and start thinking about what could go right." "Okay," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "Yes, I'd like that." His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. "Really? Really?" And as she said it, she felt something settle in her chest. Not certainty exactly, but a willingness to find out what came next. "But Anderson, yeah? If we're doing this, we do it right. Clear boundaries at work, honest communication, no games or assumptions." "Absolutely," he agreed immediately. "Whatever you need to feel comfortable." She smiled, feeling lighter than she had all week. "Then I guess we're really doing this." "I guess we are." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles that sent heat shooting up her arm. "Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, I'll pick you up." As he walked away, leaving her alone with her racing heart and trembling hands, Christina realized that some leaps of faith are worth the fall, and she was ready to jump. Sometimes the scariest decisions lead to the most beautiful destinations. Some nights change everything you thought you knew about love. Christina stood before her bedroom mirror, changing clothes for the third time in an hour. The black dress was too formal. The jeans felt too casual. The burgundy wrap dress was perfect, but reminded her too much of their dinner in Vermont, and she wanted tonight to feel like a fresh start. Finally, she settled on a deep emerald silk blouse tucked into high-waisted black trousers, paired with her favorite heels and delicate gold jewelry. The color brought out the warmth in her dark skin, and the cut was both elegant and comfortable. Her natural curls framed her face in soft waves, and she'd applied makeup that enhanced her features without looking overdone. "This is just a date," she told herself, applying a final swipe of lip gloss. "A normal adult date with a man you happen to work with. People do this all the time." But even as she tried to calm her nerves, her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her purse and jacket. This wasn't just any date. This was Anderson, the man who'd made her laugh on the worst night in recent memory, who'd kissed her like she was precious, who looked at her professional achievements with genuine pride and admiration. This could be the beginning of something real. Her phone buzzed with a text. "On my way up. You look beautiful, I'm sure." Heat bloomed in her cheeks at his confidence, at the way he seemed to know exactly what to say to make her feel special. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, not wanting him to come up to her apartment just yet. That felt like a level of intimacy she wasn't quite ready for. She met him in the lobby of her building, and the sight of him made her breath catch. Gone was the business attire she was used to seeing him in. Instead, he wore dark jeans that fit him perfectly, a navy button-down with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, and a charcoal grey blazer that brought out his eyes. His hair was styled but less formal than usual, and when he smiled at her, she felt that familiar jolt of electricity. "Wow," he said softly, his grey eyes travelling over her appreciatively. "You look incredible." "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." She gestured toward his casual elegance. "This is a good look for you." "Thanks. I thought we could skip the stuffy restaurant scene for our first official date." His smile was warm and slightly nervous, which she found endearing. "I hope you don't mind walking a few blocks." "I love walking in the city," she said truthfully. "Lead the way." As they stepped out onto the Harlem street, Anderson offered his arm with old-fashioned gallantry that made her heart flutter. The October evening was crisp but comfortable, perfect for strolling through the tree-lined streets of her neighborhood. "I've never really explored this part of the city," Anderson admitted as they walked. "It's beautiful. How long have you lived here?" "About 2 years. I fell in love with the building the moment I saw it." She gestured toward the elegant brownstones lining the street. "It's more than I can really afford, but sometimes you have to invest in things that make you happy." "Smart philosophy," he agreed. "Though from what I've seen of your work, I suspect you won't have to worry about affording anything for much longer. The Willowbrook proposal alone is going to open doors you haven't even thought of yet." Pride warmed her chest at his confidence in her abilities. "You really think so?" "I know so. You have a gift, Christina. The way you see possibilities where others see limitations. The way you create experiences that touch people's hearts." He paused, glancing at her sideways. "It's remarkable. You're remarkable." The genuine admiration in his voice made her pulse race. Blake had always seemed threatened by her professional success, had made comments about her obsession with work. Anderson spoke about her career like it was something to be celebrated. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know." They walked in comfortable silence for a few blocks, and Christina found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the evening. Anderson's presence beside her felt natural, right? Like something she'd been missing without realizing it. "So where are we going?" she asked as they turned onto a busier street lined with restaurants and shops. "You'll see." His smile was mysterious. "I wanted our first date to be somewhere special, but not so fancy that we couldn't actually talk." 2 blocks later, he stopped in front of a small jazz club called Blue Notes. The exterior was understated, brick facade with a simple blue neon sign, but she could hear the sultry sounds of a saxophone drifting from inside. "Jazz?" she asked, delighted surprise coloring her voice. "You mentioned at the wedding that you loved jazz," he said, looking suddenly uncertain. I hoped you'd enjoy this. They have incredible musicians, great food, and the atmosphere is intimate without being overwhelming." The fact that he'd remembered such a small detail from their brief conversation weeks ago made her chest tight with emotion. "Anderson, this is perfect." His relief was visible. "Really? I wasn't sure if it was too low-key for a first date." "It's exactly right," she assured him, and meant it completely. The interior of Blue Notes was everything she could have hoped for. Dim lighting, intimate tables, a small stage where a quartet was performing a sultry rendition of "The Way You Look Tonight." The maitre d' led them to a corner table that offered privacy while still giving them a clear view of the musicians. "This is incredible," Christina said, settling into her chair and taking in the atmosphere. "How did you find this place?" "I may have done some research," Anderson admitted, looking pleased by her reaction. "Asked around, read reviews, wanted to find something that felt like us. Us." The word sent warmth spreading through her chest. They were an us now, tentatively but officially. Over dinner, incredible seafood and perfectly prepared vegetables that complemented rather than competed with the music, they talked about everything and nothing. Anderson told her about growing up in Boston, about his parents who'd built their own business from nothing and taught him the value of hard work and integrity. She shared stories about her childhood in Atlanta, about her grandmother, who taught her to see beauty in everyday moments. "She sounds like an amazing woman," Anderson said after Christina finished telling him about her grandmother's garden, where she'd learned to appreciate how individual elements could come together to create something beautiful. "She was. She died when I was in college, but—" Christina paused, surprised by how easy it was to share these memories with him. "She's the reason I do what I do. She taught me that creating beauty, making people feel special, that's not frivolous. It matters." "It does matter," Anderson agreed, his grey eyes serious. "What you do, the way you make people's most important moments perfect, that's not just a job, Christina. That's a calling." The understanding in his voice, the way he saw her work as something meaningful rather than just profitable, made her fall a little deeper. As the evening progressed, she found herself studying his face as he listened to the music, noting the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the elegant line of his hands as he gestured while telling stories. When a slow, sultry number began, he stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me," he asked, his voice low and warm. She let him lead her to the small dance floor, where a few other couples swayed to the intimate music. His arms came around her with familiar warmth, and she melted into his embrace, remembering their first dance at the wedding, but knowing this was different, more real, more theirs. "I've been wanting to hold you like this again," he murmured against her ear, his breath sending shivers down her spine. "Just like this?" she asked softly, looking up into his grey eyes. "Just like this," he confirmed, then paused. "Well, maybe with fewer clothes between us." The boldness of his admission, delivered with a slight smile that was both innocent and devastating, made heat pool low in her belly. "Anderson, too much?" he asked, but his eyes were dancing with mischief. "Not too much," she whispered. "Just dangerous." "Good dangerous or bad dangerous?" She considered this as they swayed to the music, her body pressed against his, acutely aware of his warmth and strength and the way he smelled like expensive cologne and something uniquely him. "Very good dangerous," she admitted. His smile was slow and devastating. "I was hoping you'd say that." When the song ended, they didn't immediately separate. Instead, they stood there on the small dance floor, holding each other while the music shifted to something more upbeat around them. "We should probably go back to our table," Christina said, though she made no move to step away. "Probably," Anderson agreed, but his hands remained on her waist, his thumbs tracing small circles that sent electricity through her entire body. "People are starting to stare," she pointed out. "Let them," he said, his voice rough with want. "You're beautiful, and I'm the luckiest man in this room." The intensity in his grey eyes made her breath catch. She'd never had a man look at her like this, like she was the answer to every question he'd never known to ask. This is how it should feel, she realized. This is what I was missing. Back at their table, conversation flowed even more easily than before. Anderson was funny, intelligent, thoughtful in ways that surprised her. He asked about her dreams beyond event planning, listened intently when she talked about maybe starting her own company someday. He shared his own aspirations. Not just business success, but making a difference, building something meaningful. "I never thought I'd want a partner in business," he admitted as they shared a decadent chocolate dessert. "I've always been too focused, too driven, but watching you work, seeing how you approach problems—" "What?" she prompted when he trailed off. "I think we could build something incredible together. Professionally, I mean." His smile was soft, though I'm hoping for more than just professional partnership. The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability beneath his confidence, made her chest tight with emotion. "What are you hoping for, Anderson?" He was quiet for a long moment, his grey eyes studying her face. "Everything," he said finally. "I'm hoping for everything." As they walked back to her building later that night, Christina felt like she was floating. The evening had been perfect. The music, the conversation, the way Anderson had made her feel like the only woman in the world. When they reached her front steps, she turned to face him, not quite ready for the night to end. "Thank you," she said softly, "for tonight, for the restaurant choice, for everything." "Thank you for saying yes," he replied, stepping closer, "for giving this a chance." They stood there in the warm glow of the streetlights, the sounds of the city quiet around them. Anderson reached up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone in a gesture that was becoming beautifully familiar. "I want to kiss you," he said quietly, "but I also want to do this right. Take things at a pace that feels good for both of us." The consideration in his voice, the way he was putting her comfort before his own desire, made her fall even harder. "What if I want you to kiss me?" she asked, stepping closer until there was barely any space between them. His smile was brilliant. "Then I'd say, you read my mind." The kiss was everything their first had been and more, tender but passionate, sweet but promising. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Christina felt like the world had shifted on its axis again. "Good night, Christina," Anderson said softly, pressing one more gentle kiss to her forehead. "Good night, Anderson." As she watched him walk to his car, as she climbed the steps to her building with her heart racing and her lips still tingling, Christina realized she was in serious trouble. She was falling in love with Anderson Mack, and for the first time in years, that didn't scare her. It excited her. Sometimes the best first dates are the ones that make you forget it's a first date at all. Sometimes love means choosing to fight when everything tells you to run. 3 weeks had passed since their first date, and Christina felt like she was living in a beautiful dream. Secret lunches in quiet cafes, late-night phone calls that stretched until dawn, stolen kisses in empty conference rooms that left her breathless and wanting more. Anderson had become the sunshine in her days and the warmth in her nights, and she was falling deeper in love with every shared smile, every gentle touch. The Willowbrook partnership had been approved, bringing prestige and revenue that exceeded even Anderson's optimistic projections. Christina's career was soaring, her confidence at an all-time high. Everything in her life felt perfectly aligned, which was exactly when it all came crashing down. "Christina, my office now." Richard Thorne's voice cut across the Monday morning bustle like a blade. The tone was sharp, cold, completely unlike his usual warm professionalism. Christina looked up from the Hartley Foundation Gala timeline she'd been reviewing, her stomach immediately knotting with anxiety. What could be wrong? The gala was next week. Everything was perfectly organized, every detail confirmed and double-checked. She gathered her tablet and followed Richard to his office, noting the way conversations seemed to stop as she passed, the way colleagues avoided eye contact. Something was very wrong. Richard closed his office door behind them with more force than necessary, then turned to face her with an expression she'd never seen before. Disappointment mixed with something that looked like betrayal. "Sit down," he said tersely. Christina perched on the edge of the chair across from his desk, her mind racing through every recent project, every client interaction, trying to figure out what could have generated this level of tension. "Richard, if this is about the Bennett wedding flowers—" "This isn't about flowers," he interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "This is about you, sleeping with the CEO." The words hit her like a physical blow. Christina's mouth went dry, her heart hammering against her ribs as she stared at Richard's furious expression. What? Don't insult my intelligence by playing dumb." Richard leaned forward, his eyes hard. "Did you think no one would notice? The way you two look at each other, the fact that you've both been leaving early on the same days, the intimate conversation I witnessed in the conference room last Thursday, when Anderson had stayed late to help her with venue logistics, when they'd gotten caught up in discussing the Hartley timeline, and he'd moved close enough to point out details on her laptop screen, when she'd turned to ask him a question and found his face inches from hers, when they'd shared a moment of charged silence before remembering where they were. "Richard, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think," he snapped. "You're having an affair with Anderson Mack, and it's compromising this entire company." The word affair made her flinch. It sounded sordid, cheap, nothing like the beautiful connection she and Anderson had been building. "We're not having an affair," she said quietly, trying to keep her voice steady. "We're dating, we're adults, and we're handling it professionally." Richard's laugh was bitter. "Professionally? Christina, half the office is talking about the favoritism, about how you got the Vermont assignment, how suddenly you're involved in every major decision. People are questioning whether your recent success is based on talent or who you're sleeping with." Each word was like a knife to her chest. Everything she'd worked for, every achievement she'd earned through late nights and creative vision and sheer determination, reduced to gossip about sleeping her way to the top. "That's not true," she whispered, but even as she said it, she could see how it looked from the outside. The timing of their relationship, Her sudden involvement in high-profile projects, Anderson's obvious preference for her ideas in meetings. Isn't it? Richard's voice was relentless. The Willowbrook contract. Do you think you would have gotten that assignment if you weren't involved with Anderson? The Hartley Gala management role that should have gone to someone with more experience. The raise that went through without the usual review process. Raise? Christina's heart stopped. What raise? Richard's expression shifted from anger to something like pity. The salary increase Anderson approved last week. 15,000, effective immediately. You didn't know. The room seemed to tilt around her. Anderson had given her a raise without telling her, without discussing it, without even mentioning it during their intimate conversations about work and dreams and building something together, because he knew how it would look, because he knew she'd refuse it if she realized the optics. I need to talk to Anderson, she said, standing on unsteady legs. He's in a board meeting until noon, Richard said, his voice slightly gentler now. Christina, I like you. I think you're incredibly talented. But this situation, it's becoming toxic for the company. People are questioning every decision, every promotion, every project assignment. What are you saying? Richard was quiet for a long moment. His expression conflicted. I'm saying that something needs to change. Either the relationship ends, or one of you needs to find another position. The ultimatum hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Choose Anderson or choose her career. Choose love or choose everything she'd worked to build. How long do I have? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. End of the week, Richard said quietly. I'm sorry, Christina. I really am. Christina spent the rest of the morning in a haze of numb shock, going through the motions of work while her mind reeled with the implications of Richard's ultimatum. Every glance from colleagues felt loaded with judgment. Every whispered conversation seemed to be about her. Is this what Blake felt like? She wondered bitterly. When people found out about his affairs, when his professional reputation became tangled with his personal choices. But this was different, wasn't it? She and Anderson weren't cheating, weren't hurting anyone. They were two consenting adults who'd found something real and beautiful together, except that apparently it was hurting her reputation, her career, everything she'd worked for. When Anderson's board meeting finally ended, she was waiting outside his office like a woman preparing for execution. He emerged looking relaxed and happy, his grey eyes lighting up the moment he saw her. Hey, beautiful, he said softly, moving closer with that warm smile that usually made her heart flutter. I was hoping I'd see you before lunch. Want to grab something together? We need to talk, she said quietly. Your office. Now. Something in her tone made his expression shift from warmth to concern. He unlocked his office door and gestured for her to enter, closing it behind them with a soft click. What's wrong? He asked immediately, studying her face with worried grey eyes. Did you give me a raise? The question came out sharper than she'd intended. Anderson's slight wince told her everything she needed to know. Christina, $15,000, without discussing it with me, without even telling me. She crossed her arms, trying to hold herself together. Why? Because you deserved it, he said simply. Your work on the Willowbrook project alone justified it, and your contributions to the company have been, or because we're sleeping together. The crude phrasing made him flinch. Don't reduce what we have to that. That's what everyone else is calling it, she said bitterly. That's what Richard called it when he gave me an ultimatum this morning. Anderson's face went very still. What kind of ultimatum? The relationship ends or one of us leaves the company. She watched his expression harden, saw the moment when the implications hit him. People are talking, Anderson. They think my recent success is because I'm sleeping with you. They think everything I've achieved is because of favoritism instead of talent. That's bullshit, Anderson said fiercely. You're the most talented consultant this company has ever had. Anyone who suggests otherwise is right, she interrupted quietly. They're right. About the optics, about how this looks. I got the Vermont assignment right after we met. I got the Hartley project after we kissed. I got a raise after we started dating. How does that look to everyone else? Anderson was quiet for a long moment, his jaw clenched as he processed her words. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe Richard is right. Maybe this was a mistake. No. The word came out sharp, definitive. Don't do this, Christina. Don't let fear and other people's jealousy destroy what we have. What we have is beautiful, she said, her voice breaking slightly, but it's costing me everything else. My reputation, my credibility, the respect of my colleagues. I've worked too hard to build my career to watch it crumble because people think I'm sleeping my way to success. Then quit, Anderson said suddenly. his grey eyes intense. "Come work with me on something new. We'll start our own company, build something together where no one can question your achievements." The suggestion was tempting, seductive in its simplicity, but it also proved exactly what she'd been afraid of, that being with Anderson meant giving up her independence, her individual identity. "You don't get it," she said quietly. "I don't want to be your partner because we're together. I want to succeed on my own merit, build something with my own hands. This job, this company, it's not just a paycheck for me. It's proof that I can make it on my own." "You have made it on your own," he said desperately. "Everything you've achieved, every success, that's your talent, your vision, your hard work. But no one will see it that way now. They'll always wonder if I earned it or if you gave it to me." Tears were building behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I can't live with that doubt, Anderson. I can't build a career on that foundation." The silence that followed was deafening. Anderson stared at her with an expression of hurt and disbelief, as if he couldn't quite process what she was saying. "So that's it?" he asked finally, his voice rough with emotion. "You're going to throw away what we have because of office gossip?" "I'm protecting what I've built," she said, though the words felt like glass in her throat. "My career, my independence, my self-respect." "And what about us? What about love?" The word hung between them like a challenge. Love, the word they'd been dancing around for weeks, the feeling that had been growing stronger with every shared laugh, every gentle touch. "Love isn't enough," she whispered, the admission tearing her apart even as she said it. "Not when it costs me who I am." Anderson's face crumpled, and for a moment he looked lost, vulnerable, in a way that made her want to take back every word. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "Walking away from this, from us, it's the biggest mistake you'll ever make." "Maybe," she agreed, tears finally spilling over despite her efforts to stay strong. "But it's my mistake to make." She turned toward the door, her vision blurred with tears, her heart breaking with every step. "Christina." His voice stopped her just as her hand touched the doorknob. When she looked back, his grey eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I love you. Whatever happens, whatever you decide, I love you." The confession she'd been longing to hear, delivered at the moment when it was too late to matter. "I love you too," she whispered. "That's why this hurts so much." And then she was gone, leaving Anderson alone in his office and walking away from the best thing that had ever happened to her. Because sometimes loving someone means choosing what's best for both of you, even when it destroys you in the process. Love isn't always enough, but sometimes, just sometimes, it's worth fighting for. 6 months later, some endings are really beginnings in disguise. The Plaza Hotel ballroom looked exactly as it had 8 months ago, when Christina Vey had first laid eyes on Anderson Mack across a crowded dance floor. Crystal chandeliers cast the same warm golden light, the same elegant crowd mingled with champagne glasses, the same jazz ensemble played soft background music. But the woman standing near the windows, watching the spring sunset paint Manhattan in shades of rose and gold, was different from the one who'd once hidden behind a stranger to avoid her ex-boyfriend. Christina adjusted the strap of her midnight blue gown, a deliberate choice, the same color she'd worn that first night, and surveyed the event she'd spent 3 months planning. The Children's Hospital Gala was her masterpiece, the culmination of 6 months of building her own consulting firm from the ground up. Every detail was perfect, from the auction displays showcasing local artists to the dining tables arranged to encourage both intimacy and networking. "You did this," she reminded herself, pride warming her chest. "All on your own." Ms. Vey, a young woman with a headset, approached her with professional efficiency. "The auction is ready to begin whenever you give the signal." "Thank you, Miranda. Let's start in 5 minutes." Her assistant nodded and disappeared into the crowd, speaking quietly into her headset. Christina had hired Miranda straight out of college, bright, eager, with the same passion for creating memorable experiences that had driven Christina's own career. Building Vey events from nothing had been the hardest thing she'd ever done, but also the most rewarding. Every client, every successful event, every glowing review was proof that she could succeed on her own terms. But success, she'd learned, felt hollow when you had no one to share it with. She thought about Anderson constantly, during morning coffee in her new office in Soho, during late nights spent perfecting event timelines, during quiet moments when she let herself remember grey eyes and gentle hands, and the way he'd looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd never known to ask. "Stop," she commanded herself, the same internal reminder she'd been giving for 6 months. "He's moved on. You made your choice." She'd heard about him, of course. The New York business community wasn't that large, and Anderson Mack's success was hard to ignore. Lux Events had expanded into corporate consulting under his leadership. He'd been featured in Forbes, had been photographed at various charity functions and business conferences. Always alone, she'd noticed, though she told herself that didn't mean anything. He deserves someone who won't run when things get complicated, she thought, the familiar ache settling in her chest. Someone who won't choose career over love. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer's voice boomed across the ballroom, "if you could take your seats, we're ready to begin this evening's auction to benefit the Children's Hospital Foundation." Christina positioned herself near the back of the room, where she could monitor the flow of the event without being intrusive. She watched with professional satisfaction as her carefully orchestrated evening unfolded. Guests finding their seats, servers moving efficiently with final drink orders, the lighting dimming to focus attention on the auction stage. Everything was perfect, exactly as she'd planned. That's when she saw him. Anderson stood near the bar, devastating in a black tuxedo that fit him like it had been made for his broad shoulders. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his grey eyes scanning the room with the same confidence she remembered. But there was something different about him, a weariness around his eyes, a weight to his posture that spoke of months of long days and longer nights. He looks tired, she thought, her heart clenching with unexpected concern. When was the last time he took a vacation? For a moment their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and time seemed to stop. The noise of the auction, the chatter of guests, the clink of glasses, everything faded into background noise as Anderson's gaze held hers, with an intensity that made her breath catch. He's here. He's actually here. Then someone blocked her view, and the moment was broken. Christina shook her head, trying to refocus on her professional responsibilities. The auction was going well, with bidding fierce for several pieces. The Children's Hospital would exceed their fundraising goals by a significant margin. Focus on the job, she told herself. This is what you chose. But even as she moved through the crowd, checking on details and ensuring her clients were happy, she was hyper-aware of Anderson's presence somewhere in the room. She caught glimpses of him throughout the evening, bidding generously on a painting by a young artist, laughing at something an older woman said, always gracious and charming with everyone who approached him. Just like the night we met, she remembered. Confident but kind, powerful but approachable. The auction concluded to enthusiastic applause, and guests began to move toward the dance floor as the jazz ensemble transitioned to more danceable numbers. Christina was congratulating the hospital administrator on the evening's success when a familiar voice made her heart stop. "Excuse me, but could I steal Ms. Vey for a moment?" She turned slowly, her pulse racing, to find Anderson standing just behind her. Up close, he was even more devastating. The sharp line of his jaw, the way his tuxedo emphasized his tall frame, the subtle cologne that brought back memories of Vermont mountains and whispered confessions. "Mr. Mack," she said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight. The hospital foundation is important to me," he said, his grey eyes never leaving her face. "My sister spent time here when we were kids. Leukemia. She's fine now," he added quickly, seeing her expression of concern. "But I never forgot how the staff made a terrifying experience bearable for our family." Of course, she thought. Of course he has deeply personal reasons for being here. "It's not about me at all." "That's wonderful that she recovered," Christina said sincerely. "And thank you for your generous bidding tonight. The foundation will put it to excellent use." "Actually," Anderson said, "I was hoping we could talk, privately, if you have a moment." Every instinct told her to say no, to maintain the professional distance she'd worked so hard to establish. But something in his voice, a vulnerability beneath the confident exterior, made her nod. "Of course. There's a quiet terrace upstairs." She led him to the elevator, hyper-aware of his presence beside her in the small space. The terrace on the hotel's top floor was deserted, offering privacy and a breathtaking view of the city lights twinkling below. "So," she said, turning to face him once they were alone, "what did you want to talk about?" Anderson was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped behind his back as he looked out over the city. "I've been thinking about what you said. That last day in my office. About earning success on your own merit. About not wanting to be seen as someone who slept her way to the top." Christina's chest tightened at the memory. "Anderson, you were right," he continued, his voice quiet but steady. "I handled things badly. The raise, the assignments, the way I mixed personal feelings with professional decisions. I put you in an impossible position." "You were trying to help," she said softly. I was trying to take care of you, he corrected, but what you needed was the space to take care of yourself, to prove, to yourself and everyone else, that your success was entirely your own. He turned to face her, and the understanding in his grey eyes made her breath catch. And you have, he said simply. Vey Events is the talk of the industry. The Morrison wedding, the tech company launch, tonight's gala. You've established yourself as one of the premier consultants in the city, all on your own. Pride warmed her chest, but it was tempered by the ache of missing him. Thank you. That means everything, coming from you. It's just the truth. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his grey eyes. You're remarkable, Christina. You always were. I just wish I'd been smart enough to see that you needed to prove it to yourself before you could believe it. The sincerity in his voice, the genuine admiration, made tears prick at the corners of her eyes. I missed you, she whispered before she could stop herself. I missed you too, he said softly. Every day, every moment, I tried to move on, tried to convince myself that what we had was just infatuation, but what? But nothing I've accomplished in the last 6 months has meant anything without you to share it with. His hand moved toward her face, then stopped just short of touching. I love you, Christina. I never stopped loving you. And if there's any chance, any possibility that you might feel the same way, I want to try again. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she studied his face, seeing the hope and fear warring in his expression. I love you too, she admitted, the words spilling out like a dam breaking. I've never stopped loving you. But Anderson, the complications are manageable, he said firmly. We're both established in our careers now. You have your own company, I have mine. We can build something together as equals, as partners in every sense of the word. What are you saying? I'm saying that Mac Enterprises has been looking for an exclusive event planning partner, someone who understands luxury markets, who can create experiences that reflect our brand values. His smile was warm, hopeful. Interested in a business proposal? She stared at him, understanding dawning. You want to offer me a contract? A real business partnership? The most lucrative contract of your career, he confirmed, completely above board, negotiated by lawyers, everything professional and proper. You'd maintain full creative control, your company would get top billing, and there would be no question about favoritism or impropriety. And personally? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Personally, he said, finally reaching up to cup her face with gentle hands. I want everything. I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to celebrate your successes and support you through challenges. I want to build a life with you that honors both our independence and our love for each other. Tears were flowing freely now, months of suppressed emotion finally breaking free. Are you asking me to marry you? Not yet, he said with a soft laugh. But someday when you're ready, when we've had time to build something stable and beautiful together. Yes, I want to marry you, Christina Vey. I want to be your partner in everything. She looked into his eyes, seeing the future he was offering. Professional respect, personal happiness, love without compromise or sacrifice. What if people still talk? She asked. What if they say I'm only successful because I'm with you? Then they'll be wrong, he said simply. And anyone who matters will know the truth, that you're brilliant and talented and successful because you worked for it, because you earned it, because you're extraordinary. The conviction in his voice, the absolute certainty, made something settle in her chest. He was right. She had proven herself. She had built something beautiful on her own. And maybe, just maybe, she was strong enough now to build something even better with him. Okay, she whispered. Okay? His voice was hopeful but uncertain. Okay to the business partnership. Okay to trying again. Okay to... She smiled through her tears. Okay to everything. His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face as he leaned down to kiss her. The kiss was everything she remembered and more, tender but passionate, sweet but promising, full of love and second chances, and the possibility of forever. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Anderson rested his forehead against hers. I have something for you, he said softly, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box, and for a moment Christina's heart stopped. But when he opened it, instead of a ring, she found a delicate gold bracelet with a single charm, a tiny pair of dancing shoes. To remember where we started, he said quietly, fastening it around her wrist with gentle fingers, and to promise where we're going. She looked down at the bracelet, at the way the little shoes caught the light and felt her heart overflow with love. Dance with me? He asked, extending his hand just as he had that first night. "Always," she said, placing her hand in his. As they swayed together on the quiet terrace, the city lights twinkling around them like stars, Christina realized that some stories do have perfect endings. Not because everything goes according to plan, but because the people in them are brave enough to fight for what matters. And what mattered was love. What mattered was choosing each other, again and again, through complications and challenges and the beautiful mess of building a life together. "I love you," she whispered against his ear as they danced. "I love you too," he murmured back, "forever." And as the music played and the city hummed below them, Christina knew that this was just the beginning of a partnership built on respect and equality, the beginning of a love story that honored both independence and togetherness, the beginning of everything she'd never dared to dream she could have, because sometimes when you're brave enough to let love in, it transforms not just your heart, but your entire world. And sometimes, just sometimes, the most beautiful dance is the one you almost walked away from. 3 years later, at their wedding reception, the first dance song was "The Way You Look Tonight," the same song that had been playing the night they met. Because some love stories are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, and worth celebrating forever. What did this story teach you about balancing love and ambition? Would you have made the same choice Christina did? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.